Have you ever felt that whisper in your soul calling you to something more, but all the things spinning around in your mind have kept you stuck? Well, what if I told you that choosing excellence could be both easier and more adventurous than you could ever imagine? I am Chelsea DeBruin-Colbert, your host of All Things Excellence. I'm a soul catalyst for excellence who leapt off that corporate cliff and left small-town Iowa farm life in my 20s to follow my calling, helping women come home to themselves by anchoring into who they're designed to be. I create sacred containers where women rediscover their truth, design their dream life, and transform those whispers into action. Now you can find me running my business from the soccer sidelines as a coach's wife, hiking my favorite Arizona mountain, or back in Iowa with my family, or on an adventure chasing my next sunrise, hot cup of coffee and journal in hand. Through intimate conversations about the stories, the traumas, and the transformations behind choosing excellence, we're creating a collective healing journey together. I believe in diving deep into personality designs, experimenting boldly, and learning life's greatest lessons through our beautiful chaos. Every week, my guests and I are going to rip down the curtains so you can see behind the scenes of real transformation as we explore what excellence actually looks like. Not just the highlight reel, but that messy middle where the magic happens. Whether you're seeking inspiration to take that leap or already on your journey and craving connection, this is your invitation to join us. So grab your coffee, settle in, and get ready to discover just how close you are to the life your soul is calling you to create. This is All Things Excellence. Hey everybody, welcome back to our second episode of All Things Excellence. Today we're going to talk about one of my favorite topics, and that's the Enneagram. And we could not talk about all things excellence, the stories, the traumas, the transformations that help people's lives without talking about the Enneagram because of what it's done for my personal life. So starting with a story like we love to do here, I'm going to tell you a little bit about how I found this. And so basically what happened was probably 8 years ago, my husband's best friend kept bringing this to me. He was in seminary at the time, and he kept bringing it around and telling me that I needed to learn about this. Well, I was so deep in the direct selling industry. I'd grown up in the direct selling industry, and if you know anything about that, they are not afraid to be constantly diving into all the different personality tests. So I'd done it all, right, guys? Like we've done the DISC, we've done the Myers-Briggs, we've done this Briggs, we've done the Strengths Finders, we've done so many of those different things at this time. And I kept saying to him, the last thing I need is yet another personality test. So maybe you're going, oh my gosh, really? This is where she's going. Episode 2, here we are, diving right into another personality assessment. But I want you guys to know this one is like none other. And he kept bringing it back to me. I would have other random friends that would bring it up. And then finally one day he was visiting on his bromance weekend. He and my husband love having a good bromance weekend, which says a lot about their own Enneagram. And I finally caved, right? So what do? You get on the internet, you Google out like, okay, Enneagram, you find a test, you take the test, which now looking back, I definitely wouldn't recommend that. I don't recommend that to people to just jump on the internet and take a test. I think there's better places to start, but that's what I did that day, right? And it said to me that I was either a 3 or an 8, right? And so with the Enneagram, there are 9 different, we'll say personality types, right? Like there's 9 different personality types with the Enneagram. And it said that I could be or 3 or an 8. And I remember looking at my husband's best friend and saying, it says I'm a 3 or an 8. And he goes, oh yeah, I always knew that you would be one of those too. I just didn't know which one you were. And so, I had to look at it. And in that moment, it called me either the challenger or the aggressor, which I found very funny because I ironically got really mad at it. I was like, I'm not aggressive. You're aggressive. Like, this is stupid. This test is dumb, right? So I immediately got mad and angry at the test for the results that it gave me. And I think a lot of people do. I think a lot of people Google the Enneagram, they find a quiz, they take it gives them the answer, it tells them things that they love about themselves, but it also tells them some things that they maybe don't love about themselves. And so people either tend to dive in, look at all of the memes on Instagram that can be right, but a lot of times are pretty generalized. They tend to think they're maybe like a 2-wing 7, which isn't even possible. Or, they tend to take that and use it more as a sword against people. Like, oh, this person in my life is aggressive. They absolutely must be an 8 because all 8s must be aggressive and rude. Or they tend to use it as a shield for themselves as to this is my personality and this is why I'm this way. And so today, my biggest hope, guys, is that I'm going to take you on a little journey, give you some more insights on each Enneagram type, just a really high flyover, super high flyover. And my hope with that is that we can just broaden your perspective as to some different people in your life, right? Because this is what I feel. I feel like life is all about creating more understanding, having more compassion. So that way, I've always felt like all my life, I said this to a therapist of mine when I was in my early 20s. She said, you're really eager to understand why people do things. And I remember saying in all my 21-year-old glory at the time, I just feel like if I could understand why people make the choices that they make, maybe it would be easier to love them. If I could just understand why they are doing what they're doing, why they make the choices that they make, maybe it would be easier to love them. And I remember her saying, well, that's pretty deep for you at 21. And I thought, I just don't want to be annoyed with people all the time. Like that was really my desire. And now years later, lots of books, all the things, I've got a lot of compassion, and I'm not saying I always like what people do, but I'm saying maybe I don't even have empathy. I wouldn't even say I have empathy, but I would say that the Enneagram has helped me have perspective as to why everyone isn't just like me and why that's a really great thing. So let's dive into a little bit of the framework of the Enneagram, right? So we've got the 9 different personality types. Then we've got triads, okay? So there's the 9 different personality types, numbers 1 through 9. You're only one of those numbers. You are born that way and you are that way your whole life. You do not shift. You do not change. You might test different numbers throughout your life. And that's not because you're shifting and changing your Enneagram. That's purely because as we shift and we grow and we change, we move in stress, we move out of stress, we move into more of a secure environment and then maybe back out again. We tend to reflect different numbers, and that is also a huge part of the Enneagram. So with those triads, there are obviously the 9 types. Each 3 types are in a different triad. So you've got the more head, thought-based triad, you've got the more heart, softer feelings triad, and then you've got the gut, anger triad. So numbers 2, 3, and 4 are in the heart triad, where that very first instinct reaction, like that first emotion that they're going to have about something, they're going to feel it in their heart. They're going to go, my goodness, why? They wouldn't even say why, really. They just instantly, it hits their emotions, right? So I always say, if you're a mom and somebody's like, you're a terrible mom, somebody that you care that they said that, and you go, you feel it in your heart, right? It causes you to get a little emotional. If you're more in that head thinking triad, right? More that 5, 6, 7, somebody would be like, you're a bad mom. And you go to your head and go, why would they say that? What did I do? What makes them think that, right? Where you might tend to have more of that analyzation, paralyzation thing, while the heart triad tends to struggle a little bit more with that shame. The head triad tends to struggle a little bit more with anxiety. Then you move into the gut anger triad. Those are the people, they don't feel about what they say before they say it. They don't think about what they say before they say it. They just shoot it from their gut. They drop it out of their mouth. They're in that 8, 9, 1 triad, and they tend to identify more with anger, right? They can get a little bit angry, sometimes externally, sometimes internally, but their anger, really underneath that anger, they're all just seeking justice and fairness, sometimes for themselves, but a lot of times just for the world. Then from there, we go into wings. We're going to talk about wings, where you cannot be a 2-wing 7, my friends. You can only wing to the left or to the right. So if you're a 9, you can be a wing 8, or you can be a wing 1. If you're a 1, you can be a wing 9 or a wing 2. And as I'm going through this, if you're going, oh my gosh, I'm already so overwhelmed, I do just want to give you a little heads up. We do constant webinars and masterclasses to dive deeper into this. So you don't have to read a book. You don't have to just listen to Audible. You can jump on an actual class with us if you're already going, oh my gosh, my head is spinning. I want to encourage you right now, keep going. We're going to get to even more fun stuff. And I promise it will get a little bit simpler, but stick with me on this. This just kind of clears up some of the clutter, right? So you can only wing one way or the other. And so your wing, like I'm an 8 and I can have a wing 7 or I can have a wing 9. Some people are just pretty pure in their own type. They could be just an 8. They could have been more in their wing 7 in their early years, and then they've developed that wing 9, because that's the point, right? Guys, birds fly best with 2 wings. So we're hoping that we're developing both of those wings as life goes. But again, you can only wing to the numbers right beside you. We do have a way in the Enneagram that you might reflect a different number when you're in stress and when you're in security. And you guys, that is not like growth or health. That's not what I'm talking about. But because you can be the most mentally healthy person in the entire world and still experience a little bit of stress in your life, and that will cause you to show up as a different number. And then you have that place that you go when you are with those people that you feel the most safe and the most secure with. You know, I always joke, I can be one person in the comfort of my own home and all my introvertedness. And then there are certain environments that I step into and it brings out the most stressed version of me, where for me, I tend to want to like shore up all my resources, and my resources being energy and people bandwidth. So you can kind of look at that. That's what I love about the Enneagram, is that not only does it help you understand your motivation, it helps you understand your needs, it helps you understand your fears, but my favorite part about it is it helps you be able to more quickly identify your rumble strips. And when I say your rumble strips, I mean like when you're driving down the highway and there's those da 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 da, right? If your car gets like your car starts shaking like da 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 da, right? You get too close to the right or you get too close to the left, and there's those little divots in the highway. At least there are most places in America. There's little divots in the highway, and your car starts shaking, and it's letting you know you are getting too close to the side of the road, and you might drive off, right? And so in the Enneagram, we learn about our rumble strips and our personality. So before we maybe have a meltdown or before we lose our boundaries because we're too safe and secure, and we tend to not keep as great of boundaries when we get a little too secure in our environment, those rumble strips are going to help us identify those different pieces. So we're going to jump right into the type breakdown with you guys right now. We're going to go over each of the types. I'm going to start with number 2 and I'm going to end with number 1. And throughout this, I'm going to talk occasionally about different people in my life and different stories that have caused me to love the Enneagram more and more as time has gone on. So first up, let's start with the heart triad, right? We've got number 2. Number 2. They are known as the helper. Okay, the helper, their fear is to be unloved or unwanted. Their fear is to be unloved or unwanted. And their deepest need is to be needed. Now, I see 2s and 9s mistype a lot, and I want to talk about that because the 2 is the helper and the 9 is the peacemaker. And I frequently ask people who type as a 2 and a 9, are you helpful because you need to be needed and it feels good to be needed, right? To be wanted? Or are you helpful because you need to keep the peace? Are you helpful because you need to be needed? Or are you helpful because you need to keep the peace? 2s tend to be very, very thoughtful, again, very helpful. They do tend to struggle with pride. And the thing about that is that's because deep down, they're so afraid of that rejection, right? They're afraid of that rejection. So that pride, they tend to put the needs of other people ahead of their own. Type 3 is the achiever. And you guys, just because you love achieving and winning does not mean you're a 3. I would say nobody came out of the womb going like, I'm just going to suck at life. Like, I want to be a loser. I don't want to win at anything. So just because you love winning and achieving doesn't necessarily mean that you are a type 3. But these, they carry this need inside where they have to be successful. And it's more that, like, yes, they have to be successful, but it's more that they have this deep need for the world to see them as successful. And so sometimes their struggle is deceit, and they struggle with deceit because it's deceiving the world and deceiving themselves. That, you know, it's that Wizard of Oz, right? Like, what's really behind the curtain? There's the image that they're showing to the world, and then there's that reality that's behind the curtain, because their deepest fear is that they would be a failure, that they would be worthless, right? Because they desire to have that status, that respect, to be admired. They need efficiency, they're very driven, and they're very image conscious. Like, image very much matters to them, which is when I knew, when I had personally on that test typed as either a 3 or an 8, I knew right away I probably should care more, honestly, about what people think. My parents always joke like, oh my gosh, she's just so shameless. Like, we wish she cared a little bit more about what the world sees than she does. But here we are. Moving on to type 4. Type 4s, they're very expressive. They're very unique. They're called the individualists. Something that I've said to type 4s over and over again, and every single one of them has resonated with this. It's the way that they experience emotions in their body, right? Because they are in that heart feeling triad. I always say being a 4 And experiencing emotions is like taking a bag of Skittles, dumping it in your hand, and tossing all of those Skittles in your mouth at one time. And just the way that you would taste all the flavors of the rainbow. Fours also are experiencing all of the feelings and all of the emotions all at once. They tend to be some of the most misunderstood, and that's just because they have that surge of feelings where they are born, their fear is that they're defective, right? Their fear is that they're defective, that they're inadequate. They fear being insignificant. So people with that 2, 3, 4, if you translate this over into like the Clifton strengths, very frequently I see people with the 2, 3, 4 have significance very high in their strengths. And that's because, for fours being the individualist, their desire is to be unique, right? To be unlike anyone else. But the thing that their internal struggle is envy, right? Envy, because they are born feeling not as comfortable in their skin as most people, and they are so envious, wishing and hoping that they could be as comfortable in their skin as they feel other people are, right? It's maybe not the reality that everyone's walking around so comfortable in their own skin, but fours feel like everyone else must be so comfortable in their own skin compared to them. We're going to move on now to the head triad, moving on to that head triad. Okay, actually, no, I'm going to back it up. Because, y'all, I can't not tell the story about my favorite 4 in my life. And every time I tell this story, I think I was probably trying to skip over it, right? My subconscious brain is like, let's not go there. This is episode 2. Are we going to cry in episode 2 of our podcast? But my favorite 4 in the whole entire world in my life is my sister-in-law. And I will tell y'all, we are, like 5 or 6 years apart. And yeah, I think we're like 5 or 6 years apart. And there was always this struggle because I'm a little bit of a wrecking ball personality. I told you all, like, I don't really think about, especially in my early years, right? Where I was definitely a lot more mature. I didn't realize until the Enneagram how the world was experiencing me. And I mean that genuinely. Like, as an 8, I can tell y'all, I did not realize how strong, how abrasive, and I'll just say it, wrecking ball, right? Like, the growth of an 8 is to not be a bulldozer, but to try to be a snowplow, right? Bulldozers plow down everything in their way, while snowplows gently pave the way, right? So I needed to move from being a bulldozer to being a snowplow, and I wasn't there yet. And for her as a 4 who just wanted to be loved and needed it and accepted and all of those things, right? To not be emotionally cut off, I tended to kind of like bulldoze my way into the room. And in all of my level 10 confidence, the way I came out of the womb, pretty much everything about the way I lived my life was making her feel more probably insecure. And there was this, we'll call it an incident, right? I'll call it an incident where we were putting together the baby shower for my other sister-in-law. And I was in what I call go mode, where you're checking all the boxes, you're getting all the things done, you've got this vision in your head of how this baby shower is going to be. And when I'm in extreme go mode as an 8, I tend to forget that feelings exist because I have a vision and I'm bringing it to reality for the sake of the world or whoever I'm building this for. And there was just this moment where, my mom brought the cake in and the cake had sunken in itself. It was so soft and so delicious. It literally sunken in itself. And I just gasped, and she was across the room, and I'm sure she felt the surge of my emotions from across that room. And it just created, it like was the cherry, it was the straw that broke the camel's back, it was all of it. And everything that day had really led up to this huge explosion, right? Where I think it was, for her, it probably was years of me not paying attention and not knowing, really, it wasn't on purpose. Like, it wasn't on purpose. Making her feel unwanted and uninvited and just, right, that flawed, not important, all of those things. And that day was just when it had enough. And we kind of had a little explosion. But honestly, we didn't even really talk. She went one way and I went the other way. The baby shower happened and I went back home to Texas from Iowa, and that was that. We didn't talk for 6 months. It was not good. My brother was like, this is on you. You're the one with all the tools. You need to figure this out. And during that time, I was listening to a podcast episode about all the different Enneagram types. And in there, Suzanne Stabile had said how there are so many misunderstandings in families that could be healed and so many broken relationships that could be mended if people just knew about the Enneagram. And in that moment, I'd heard what it was like for her to be a 4. I heard what it was like for her to be envious of how comfortable other people are in their skin, how, she has this desire to be unique, how she always felt defective or insignificant. And I realized that I get it, guys. Like, I'm not saying we need to rearrange our life to be everything that everybody needs at all the time, right? Like, that's on them. They've got to work on their own stuff. They've got to heal their own stuff. But I think sometimes when it comes to family, we've got to make certain exceptions. Absolutely, we've got to have boundaries, right? But in this moment, I had to look at myself and go, I'm the one with all the tools. I'm definitely the one who is older. At this moment, we're probably, I don't know, like 28 and 33 years old. And so it really kind of was on me at that age, right? To just take it and see what I could do to heal the situation. And so I reached out to her and I just told her that I missed her and that I loved her and that she's important to me and that I wouldn't want anybody else in my life but her, and that I keep trying really hard for her, but I'm pretty sure I always keep missing the mark. But I just want you to know I'm never going to stop trying. And for her to hear that, right? For her to hear, no matter, I want you, you're important to me. I know I'm always screwing it up, but I want you to know that I'm never going to stop trying. That shifted our relationship forever. And you guys, it was the Enneagram that did that for me. And since then, in her own words, she would tell you that the Enneagram has definitely brought us so much closer in our relationship. And so that moment caused me to become, we'll say, passionately obsessed with the Enneagram. And not just for myself, but with other people, because I have such a deep desire to help other people build bridges of communication and mend relationships in their life. So that's my little 4 story, which I promise I won't have a story for all of them along the way. So we'll dive back into the head. We'll go back into our head triad. Okay, so head triad, we have the 5s, right? The 5s, they're known as the professors, the investigators. They love researching because their basic need is to know. They want to dive in deep. They want to find the information. Like, I'm the type of person, I'm like, can I just pay you to find me the information? And they're like, yes, you absolutely can, because I want to know about all of it, right? They're the ones that are actually reading the labels and diving into all the things. Not on everything, but on the topics that they love and that they definitely want to be seen as an expert in, because their fear is ignorance, right? Their fear is that they would be ignorant or incompetent. They also fear being invaded or having too many obligations. And the reason for that is because they wake up every single day with this finite amount of fixed energy. And so they are constantly navigating, going, how much bandwidth do I have left to be able to do what I need to do today? And so for a lot of 5s, I always encourage them, if you're finding that you're getting to the end of the day and you are lacking the mental and emotional bandwidth to complete the tasks that need to be completed, which is causing you to have a lot of thoughts about all the feelings happening in your body, you need to examine your daily situation and just look at your life and go, what is going on in my life right now that is causing my body battery to drain faster than it should? And it's basically like taking an electric car sometimes for a 5, and it's like driving straight up the mountain as opposed to driving on flat surface, right? If they're in the wrong environment, if they're doing the wrong things, it's going to be like driving their car straight up a mountain as opposed to driving on a flat surface. And so I always encourage them to examine their life and find those areas that are causing their body battery to drain quicker than it could, and figure out a way to better use their resources. But just knowing that, right, that they're always assessing throughout the day, every single day, how all of their energy is being utilized. Next, moving on to our type 6. Our type 6s, they are the loyalists, and They are that, you guys. They are loving, and they are loyal, and they love having a sense of security. They love being supported. They do fear being blamed, targeted. They have a fear of abandonment, and that is because their basic need is just that. It's security, right? They have this deep desire to feel safe and secure in their environment, and they do tend to struggle with anxiety. And it's just that anxiety of like, what's going on the horizon, like looking out and always planning for the next thing. One of my siblings is a 6, and it's kind of my favorite thing about him, because in all of his 6ness, he tends to want to make sure that all of our relationships are always really good. And my favorite thing about that with him is that he is so good at reaching out to us and making sure he stays in good contact with us, and that our relationship is always in a good space. Okay. Another thing about 6s is they, in that anxiety, they can tend to be your doomsday preppers, right? But one of my bestest friends, who is also my naturopath doctor, she is a 6, and I love this about her, because a 6, like, that's a really great doctor, right? I always say, I'm throwing myself off of some side of a cliff, and it tends to make sure that I'm not, gonna like poison myself as I'm falling on the way down. She'll bring all of the worst case scenarios to me about my body and my health, and then I'll pick the top 3 things that I can work on right now. My executive assistant is also a 6. I love that, because that means she is loyal to me forever. She is so good and kind and caring and helpful. But also, I tend to just, again, y'all, in life, I tend to like leap and figure it out on the way down. And she is so good about making sure that I'm not going to splat at the bottom, but that I'm going to figure out how to build the wings for the current project that I'm going after. So that's our 6s, our loyalists. We love them. Next up, we're going to move on to our 7s. Our 7s can be called the adventurers. They can be called the enthusiasts. They're entertaining. They're the optimists. And so they love being happy. They love being fully satisfied. That's why their internal struggle is actually gluttony. And it's gluttony because they love indulging in all the goodness of life, right? They're the ones in life where they're going to squeeze all of the juice out of the berries. Like, that's their thing. And I always say, like, indulgence. Like, they are the ones that are super indulgent. I actually saw a photo of someone last night on Instagram. They were showing a photo of how they organize their swimsuits. Y'all, I swear this woman had no less than like 60, 70, 80 swimsuits. And she, God bless her, like, she'd had a closet organizer come in and organize them all in these special little bags. But all I could think was, you are the epitome of a 7. Like, this is that overindulgence, that gluttony of a 7, where who needs 10 swimsuits? I'm going to have 10,000, right? Like, who needs one of this when you can have 100? So more is always more. Like, more is always better. They always want more, right? So their fear, and that's because they fear being deprived, fearing being trapped in emotional pain, and their basic need is to avoid pain. So they are the master reframers. I always nobody sells and buys their own stuff better than an Enneagram 7. And that's because they want to stay in that happy place, right? They want to stay in the joy. Like, they are the creators of the FOMO. They created that fear of missing out thing because they're always chasing that next hit of joy, excitement, fun, adventure. And I can say, I absolutely do have that wing 7, and I can tell when it's waving really strong because I'm probably booking a flight. And I'm not saying that all 7s love booking a flight, but I mean, I would say a lot of them, most of them, love a really, really good adventure, whatever that looks like for them. They love the fun. They love the party. They are the fun. They are the party. So moving on to type 8s. Type 8s, they are known as the protectors, the challengers. Sometimes in lower health, they are known as the aggressors. They are your people that if you really need something taken care of, right? They're the people that it's like everything you love them for, you also hate them for. They're going to come in and they're going to stir up the pot. They're the friend that you're out to lunch and you ordered salmon and the waitress brought you chicken, and they're going to make sure that the waitress brings you the right food. My husband is the 9, the peacemaker, and so it's very funny that I am the most intense and he is the most passive, and he will tell you that as much as he probably hates the intensity that I bring to every situation, because an 8's basic need is to come against, right? They can bring that intensity into every situation. He also loves it because if if something needs to be done, a conversation needs to be had, something needs to be taken care of, or simply, somebody needs to tell the waitress that she brought the wrong dish, his Enneagram 8 wife is absolutely going to do that. So an 8's fears are being weak, being powerless. Hear me loud and hear me clear. An 8 does not fear not being in control. 8s don't need to be in control. They just do not want to be controlled. Okay. So you will notice 8s always avoid situations where someone will have control over them. I would say that's why I wish I could work for somebody else so I could just kind of like show up and do what I need to do and then leave and go home. But I swear we're like born, we got to be entrepreneurs almost. We got to be in control of our environment, or we got to work for a boss who is really good to us and understands that need, that we cannot be in an environment where we are being controlled. Again, we don't need to be in control, but here's the deal with your 8s. If no one is going to take control and no one's going to make it happen, your 8 is definitely going to be the one that steps into that. Again, they do struggle with a little bit of, we say lust, and that's because they have this lust for intensity. If things are getting a little mundane, a little boring, they're the ones that are going to come in, they're going to stir the pot a little bit, and they're going to walk out. But again, they are your fierce protectors. They will protect their inner circle like no one that you have ever seen protecting that inner circle. And then our 9s, we've got our 9s who are the peacemakers. Again, my husband is a 9, my dad is a 9, my other sister-in-law is a 9, and honestly, a lot of my very closest friends are 9. They really are. Probably as an 8, I think a 9 is my favorite type. And I know I probably shouldn't say that, but here we are. And I think it's because I live with so much intensity in my body and in my being and who I be every day. Like, as much as everybody around me feels it, trust me, I know it, I feel it too. And I love those 9s because they fear being in conflict. They fear tension. They fear having their lifeboat rocked, right? Like, their basic need is to just avoid. Like, while a 7 wants to avoid pain, a 9 really just wants to avoid anything in the world that could cause their waters of life to be rocked, that could rock their boat. And that's, that causes them to really struggle with the sloth. And originally when I'd read that way back in the day, I thought sloth meant like, oh, they're lazy or they're slower. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I've got like the most energy and my husband's got the least energy. Like, what is this about? And really, y'all, it's this sloth of when the world gets too much for them, they tend to fall asleep to their relationships. Okay. They tend to fall asleep to their relationships. And what I can also say, the Enneagram radically changed our marriage because it caused me to understand, one, how my husband was experiencing me, but it also, two, caused me to understand why he did a lot of the things that he was doing. And I found that there were multiple times that he would maybe not be completely truthful about a situation. And his underlying motivator behind that wasn't that he wanted to lie to me to deceive me, but it was that he wanted the waters to stay peaceful. And because I wasn't quite there in self-awareness as to how stressful that reaction was for him that I was having, it was causing him to kind of like fall asleep sometimes in the intentionality in the relationship that we had in our marriage. And I see that with him in other friendships, where if something is a stressful situation for him, he's going to fall asleep to how intentional he is in that relationship in order to avoid just that stressful situation, right? And the thing that I always say is the most growth for our 9s. Guys, these 9s, here's your growth path. 9s tend to not speak up a lot of times. And that's because they don't feel like their voice matters. They don't feel like anybody cares to hear it. They kind of think, what's the point? Everybody's already said everything. I don't need to share it. But here's what I want you guys to know. On that diagram, like if you look at the Enneagram diagram, you'll notice that 9s are listed at the top. And that's because 9s have the greatest perspective of all Enneagram types. And again, I don't say empathy, but I say perspective. They bring the best perspective. They have this ability to truly stand in the shoes of all the other Enneagram types. And so, to my 9s out there, we don't just want to hear your voice because we care about you and we love you and you matter. We want to know what you have to say. But honestly, we need to hear your voice because your thoughts and your opinions bring this perspective that the rest of us don't have. You were born with a perspective that we do not have access to. So we don't just want to hear what you have to say, we need to hear what you have to say. And the most beautiful growth of a 9 is the day that they realize that and they start speaking up to the different areas of their life. I remember the day that my husband came home from having a manager meeting and he said, I shared my ideas today for the first time. And I said, how did it go? And he said, it was so cool. Everybody loved what I had to say. And I thought, of course they did, because they don't just love you, they respect you, right? You bring peace, you bring harmony, but also what you had to say brought such great perspective. I'm positive they recognized it as a really great idea. So last but not least, we're going to move on to our type ones. Our type ones are the perfectionist, right? Their basic need being they need perfection. And if you're feeling a little, sometimes ones, threes, and eights can tend to mistype. And that's because a one needs perfection, a three needs efficiency, and an eight needs excellence. But it can come across very differently, right? That's why we love the Enneagram, because the Enneagram isn't saying what the behavior is. The Enneagram is saying, but why are you acting that way, right? A one can be intense, a three can be intense, an eight can be intense, but those ones are coming with that intensity because they need things to be perfect. My growth question for them is always, is this the rule, like the way, or is this your way? Is this the only way? Really? Like, is this like the rule of the world that this is supposed to be done like this specific way? Or is this your need for things to be perfect in the way that you see them needing to be perfect? Right? Is that really what it is? Is it the rule or is it your rule, right? So their fear is being wrong, being bad, being evil, being corruptible. They desire to have integrity, to be good, to be accurate, right? Like, and my thing with them, where I always try to bring compassion, if you have a one in your life, is I know they come across as very critical. And if you're a one, I'm sure you've been told that you can be critical, right? And it's from this place of you want things to be so perfect for the world, right? You want the world to be this good, wonderful place. And you think that if everything could just be this way, that the world would be a better place. And you do truly feel like you're helping create justice and fairness in the world. But just know, as critical as you might feel they are to you and others, they're actually 10 times more critical to themselves, okay? 10 times more critical to themselves. A common mistype I see with the one and the three is a one can be critical because this is the way that it's supposed to be done. But I've also seen people who are threes struggle with a little bit of criticism, but that is more of an imposter syndrome thing almost kind of going on, where a three can start being critical when really they want to criticize themselves, but they don't want to see that, right? They don't want to criticize themselves where they feel like they're not matching up, where they're not being as successful as they wish that they were. So they tend to criticize the world instead of criticizing themselves, where a one really feels like they are upholding the rules of the world, the standards that the world expects things to be done. Okay. And they tend to struggle with that resentment. And the reason they struggle with resentment is because they are angry, they are upset that things aren't being done the way that they need to be done. And they get very frustrated with themselves and others for not living up to this ideal perfection. And so they tend to repress that anger. They don't tend to express it out as much. Sometimes they will. If people are a one wing two, you'll notice they can express it out, but still they tend to harbor a little bit of that resentment, because as much as you feel like they're expressing their anger and how things aren't perfect, they actually are holding a lot of it in. And they're like, are you kidding me? I could be freaking out so much worse than this, and I'm not. And so that's where they start to have that resentment that builds against sometimes themselves, but usually other people. They tend to have a lot of resentment against other people. And they kind of go to this place of, they can go to this place of like, nobody understands me. Nobody gets it. Nobody's upholding this. I'm the only person that cares. They feel like no one can hit that bar because no one's capable of hitting it. And that's really because internally, subconsciously, they know that they're probably maybe not hitting it either. And so they're carrying a lot of weight. So that, you guys, again, that is just a high flyover. I want to thank you. If you are still here, if you are still listening, and you're thinking like, oh my gosh, what type could I be? I want you to let us know, right? Like, go to my Instagram, drop it in the comments, or if you're watching this on YouTube, drop in the comments the different types that you think that you might be. And if you're wondering, okay, now what? I just heard about this. I think I might be 3 or 4 different types. What is that like? I want you to know from a resource standpoint, you can head on over to my website, and I've got a lot of resources there. I've got mistyping guides there. We can always set up a one-on-one session where instead of taking a test where 67% of people tend to mistype, because those tests are asking what you're doing, but we want to know why you're doing it. I want to help you get to the bottom and figure out, but why am I behaving in this way? What is causing me to do this? Because when we can understand why we're doing something, we can give ourselves so much compassion, and we can figure those rumble strips out, and we can create so much more peace and ease in our life for ourselves and for others. So you can head on to my website. We can have a typing session. I'm frequently holding free webinars and masterclasses where we will dive in even deeper. Or if you're listening to this and going, my company could benefit from this. My people, like, we need to know this. We need to learn this, not in like a 40-minute format, but like truly in a few hour format where we can dive into this, because we have just barely scratched the surface of these Enneagram types. That is something that I would love to help you out with. So I want to thank you for joining me today on this edition of All Things Excellence, increasing your self-awareness so you can increase your compassion. And I will see you on the next episode of All Things Excellence, where we discuss our stories, our traumas, and our transformations behind our decision to choose excellence, while giving you that 80-20 grounded in reality hope that you are closer than you think, and choosing excellence might just be easier than you know.